Right now. Okay, so good day. This is chapter 12. So for the purposes of the long test, which is now on November 24, 25, something, basta later, hindi na siya this coming week. 20, kailan ba yun? Biglang gusto ko tuloy i-check. Let me check first. Here's the thing. 25, November 25. Okay. So November 25, that's the Tuesday, not the Tuesday of that week. Now, so this is the last chapter for that's part of second long test, and then after this, lahat na ng topics is um, um lahat na ng topics is for the final exam. Okay. And the final exam, I'll make an announcement, but if I remember the email correctly, December 9 siya. So actually, we don't have a ton of time. In fact, I think starting kailan ba ang next? November 13 will be the last time we'll talk about chapter 11, I think. So it should be fine. We'll have enough time for the final topics, which are aggregate supply. And we will revisit stabilization policy due to aggregate supply being upward sloping as opposed to flat or vertical. And then second is yung growth theory, which we should be able to finish by then. So I think apart from the fact na wala tayong discussion on 25, there should be enough time. Okay. And part of that is today. So the good thing about chapter 12, which is ito, right, is it definitely builds on 10 and 11. So if nahihirapan kayo sa 10 and 11, mahirapan rin kayo sa 12. Okay? On the other hand, I think it's an easier version of 10 and 11 because the open economy sort of ties the small open economy down because of the small open economy assumption. So parang mas madali rin siya. Okay. All right, so now let's begin. This is the chapter. Every so often, I will refer to this one, but most of the time, I will refer to the slides. Not the slides, the PowerPoint. Okay. So does everyone see the PowerPoint? Just want to make sure. Thumbs up. Yes. Okay, great. Okay, so this is the PowerPoint for Mundel Flemming part 1. Okay, so well the additional PowerPoint on part 1, just to make sure we cover the important topics for the first half of chapter 12, right? And this basically is the same as ISLM, except that we're now opening it up to trade, right? So ang meaning ng doon is now S is not equal to I, right? So babalikan natin yung chapter 5. And that just also means that nx equals S minus I. Okay, that's coming from the IS curve or the goods market equilibrium, right? Okay. And similar to chapter 5, we have the same assumptions, guys. The same assumptions. So small open economy, the economy that we are studying cannot affect world prices, such as the world interest rate, right? So what determines the world interest rate? It's the same thing as in chapter 5. So in chapter 5, the world as a whole is closed economy, right? So if the world as a whole is closed economy, therefore R is the thing that's being determined there in the short run. And you can imagine the world as being determined by yung ISLM that we studied in chapter 10 and 11. Okay? So remember, nasa short run na tayo. So Y and R are endogenous in the short run. Right? Do you guys remember that? That's from chapter 10 and chapter 11, correct? Thumbs up na lang if you remember that. Both R and Y in general are endogenous in chapters 10 and 11, right? So from the perspective of the world, R star is determined by the model that we learned before in the closed economy, right? So questions, if you recall, there are questions in chapter 5 such as what happens when R star changes, right? And how can R star change? So in a classical economy, meron tayong model for that. right? And for ISLM, there are also models that will shift R star or change R star depending on whether the IS for the world, right, or the LM for the rest of the world, I should say, for the rest of the world changes, right? So changes or shifts in IS and LM will in general change both R star and the world output, right? Um, there. So you've got the small open economy, and the economy that we're studying cannot affect R star. And the thing that can change R star is the ISLM for the world, right? Next, you've got full capital mobility, which tells us that for the small open economy that we're considering, R equals R star. So remember, that's also the same as we had studied before in chapter 5. So these two assumptions are the same, right? Thus, the adjustable price is not R anymore, right? So we are leaving the R and Y situation, and we're now going to consider the real exchange rate E. Okay. So notice that CE is the same as the real exchange rate E is the same as the nominal exchange rate E, right? Because in the short run, P and P star are fixed. Okay. So the real and the nominal, they're the same thing. Okay. In the same way that the R and the R can be nominal and it can be real. And in the short run, sa ISLM, as well as here, the nominal exchange rate and the real exchange rate are one and the same. Okay, so any questions about that? Yung R and R being nominal versus real, and E being nominal and real. In this case, they're all the same. Let me pause there to ask to make sure that everyone is following. Okay, so it's very, very simple, right? Wala na yung nominal and real distinction because prices are fixed. IS, I think, becomes super easy because now here's the IS curve, which is also the equilibrium of goods and services or the loanable funds equilibrium. You can turn this into, what can you turn this into? NX equals, ano ulit? Let me pause here to make sure everyone remembers that you can transform this equation here for GDP or the goods market into what? What can you transform it into? Anyone? May chat. S minus I, right? Because S minus I, where I is now R star, of course, right? So hopefully everyone remembers this. And of course, NX is now still a function of real or nominal exchange rates. So actually, these two things on the left and the right, they're the same. So they're both the IS curve. So the rules of this are the same. Yung pinag-aralan natin sa chapter 10 and chapter 11, right? If you recall, paulit-ulit yung style natin. Nasaan yung letter, aling equation, blah, 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 right? It's all the same, except now, NX is included, right? Except now, NX is included. Okay, so let's just flash some of the relevant pictures here from the book. Okay, so again, this is the IS curve. Here's the Keynesian cross, where now NX is one of the planned expenditure, so it can change, right? It can shift up or shift down. In this case, bumaba. Okay, bumaba ang NX. Okay. Kung bumaba ang NX because of an increase in the exchange rate, so nagbago, tumaas ang E, bumaba ang NX, then that means pag bumaba ang NX, bababa rin ang Y, and therefore it preserves that negative relationship between IS and the exchange rate, real or nominal. Okay? And dala siya nito ng net export schedule, where we have learned in chapter 5 that NX and E are related, right? The stronger your domestic currency is, diba? Remember, a higher E means a stronger domestic currency. Your net exports will fall. Okay? You'll tend to import more. You use your domestic currency to buy foreign goods. Okay, so this is what the IS curve now will look like. Remember, wala na si R star or si R. The thing that adjusts is now E, okay, or the nominal exchange rate. But otherwise, it's the same IS curve right here. And then it's the same logic as well. It comes from the Keynesian cross, which changes the planned expenditure, shifts it up or down, which makes Y go up or down as E changes. Okay. All right, so let me pause here to ask if there are any questions on IS curve. In particular, please note, yung Y variable mo is not R anymore. Kasi fixed na ang R star na siya. It's now E. So let me pause here if there are any questions on this. So there are no questions? Okay, so this is in fact the IS curve that we have right now under the open economy. Next is the LM curve. So that's the next topic, LM curve. Even easier. So si LM curve now has only one endogenous variable. Nawala si R. So question, bakit nawala si R? Kasi R equals R star. So naging exogenous si R. Therefore, yung LM curve looks like this, right? Where M, P, and R star, they're all exogenous. Ano na lang yung endogenous, guys? May sagot sa chat. Y na lamang, right? So note that it does not have an E in it, or a nominal exchange rate or real exchange rate. So in E and Y space, which isasalpak mo siya together with the IS curve, it's just a vertical line. Si Y na lang yung natira, right? So for any given Y, your LM is not a function of the nominal exchange rate, which tells you that the picture of the LM curve is this. Basically, it's just a vertical line dependent on whatever the value of Y is, right? So that also tells you na pag tumaas pag nag-shift to the right ang LM, tataas ang Y because remember that's the endogenous variable. If it shifts to the right, Y will go up. If LM shifts to the left, Y will go down. Okay? So LM and Y, they're super connected right now. Okay? And only LM can change Y, right? So now you can put IS and LM together. We have the nominal exchange rate equilibrating IS through net exports, okay, and LM through Y, okay? So we can take a look at the picture and boom, it's even simpler. Ito na yung Mundel Flemming ISLM model, where again, please take note that the Y-axis has the exchange rate on it, and the higher the E, the stronger the domestic currency. GDP or real GDP is on the x-axis here. And then IS is downward sloping with respect to E. And the simple explanation lang naman siya. As the exchange rate depreciates, people will want to buy more from you, and therefore your net exports will rise. Meanwhile, LM star is fixed in Y, right? And the thing that IS basically generates, right, is E, right? Yung E. Okay. And then LM here, basically Y is determined by the LM curve, right? Y is determined by the LM curve. Okay. So let me make sure everyone understands it, right? So when we say that Y is determined by the LM curve, what are the three variables that will help us determine Y? Anyone? Importante to. So in fact, wala kasi tayong numerical example. We can generate a numerical example based on ISLM, but let's go ahead first. What are the three variables here that will determine Y? Now, you need those three in order to determine Y. Anyone? You can just open your mic if it's easier. Just say the three variables. Ano pa ang three variables? This is not a trick question. Nandito na siya. So all you have to do is read it. No one? Okay. Anyone? What are the three other variables here? And the answer is M, P, and R star. Correct. Diba? Once you know M, once you know P and R star, that will determine Y. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. So remember, again, magbigay tayo ng example. Let's say M over P equals 500, right? And the demand for money is, ano yung mga example natin before? Demand for money, which is your L, right? Which is R star, Y. Ano yung mga example natin dito? Like 1,000 minus 100 R star, right? Okay. Does everyone see this? Actually, dapat say 10Y. And there you go. Kasi it has to have both Y and R star in it, correct? Okay, so once you have R star, give me an R star. Like R star can be 2, correct? So what is the demand for money then? L 2Y equals what? Can someone figure that out? What's the demand for money now? Given that R is R star. Okay, may sagot. 10Y minus 200, right? 10, 10Y minus 200, correct? Okay. And then you're going to equate this to, ano, ito yung demand for money, you're gonna equate this to your supply of money, right? Supply of money, which is 500, correct? And then this one will give you your Y star. Okay? Ganun lang siya. So that's what we mean when we say that LM is determines Y. Because once you know the real money balances, once you know the world interest rate, you also know real GDP. Ba? And then yung nangyayari na lang guys is changes in IX will equilibrate the goods market because E or the nominal exchange rate has to change to keep Y, whatever the Y is here sa LM. Okay? And we can see that even clearer here, right, guys? The only way that Y will change is if LM will change. So sana klaro yun. Because if LM shifts to the right, tataas yung Y. If LM shifts to the left, bababa ang Y. So what determines Y is in fact the position of the LM curve. And that's super crucial. Any questions? So it's much easier, right? As opposed to before, parang supply and demand na upward sloping si LM. Pag nag-shift si LM, magbabago both ang y-axis and x-axis equilibrium values. But now, it's much simpler. The only way na magbabago yung x-axis variable or GDP is if LM changes. If IS changes in general, right, in general, especially in the case which we will talk about next, which is the flexible exchange rate, yung mag-a-adjust na lang is the flexible exchange rate. All right. So yeah, floating or flexible exchange rates case. Okay, what happens in this case? So E can change, right? E is allowed to change. So changes in IS will change E and keep Y because again, Y is determined by LM. And meanwhile, shifts in LM will change both E and Y. Okay. So let's do, there are a number of experiments in the book. The experiments are the same as in chapter 10 and 11. So ulitin nyo lang ulit yon, but this time with the vertical LM curve. But for the purposes of this recorded class, let us do expansionary fiscal policy, a rise in G together. Okay? And again, pare-pareho lang yung tanong, guys. Kung papapansin nyo, pare-pareho lang yung tanong na tinatanong ko. Where is G? Diba? Tataas ang G. Where is G? Nasa IS ba siya or nasa LM? Again, nakabase ito, guys, dun sa equation. Ito yung equation ng LM. Ito yung equation ng IS. So, nasaan si G? I will wait. Anyone can just say it? Okay, may chat. IS, napakadali, right? In fact, dapat sanay na kayo nun. Kasi for the past 2 weeks, we've always started by asking, by framing this simply as hanapan ng letra, right? If you know G is changing, G is somewhere in the system of equations. Hanapin niyo muna yun. So it's IS will shift. How does it shift? If it's a rise in G, then you can think about it in terms of PE. What does PE do? Let's start with that. PE will blank. What's PE? What will PE do? Planned expenditure. Planned expenditure, there's a chat. PE shifts to the right. Actually, it shifts up. Pwede rin shift to the right. Shift to the right kasi parang pababa eh. So actually, James, it shifts up kasi tataas ang PE, right? Okay. Tama ba, guys? It shifts to the right. PE will rise. Okay. The PE curve will rise, and then Y will also rise because Y will also rise. Okay. Because Y equals P. So you can think about this dun sa in terms of the Keynesian cross. Again, I invite you guys to think about this in terms of the Keynesian cross model. PE will shift up, increasing Y. Okay? Any questions so far? No questions, right? So how does IS shift then based on the fact that Y goes up? I can wait for that. That's pretty important. Okay, may sagot din. IS curves shifts to the right, diba? Because that means Y goes up for any exchange rate value, right? So IS shifts right. Because Y rises for any E, right? So now you can draw the old and the new curves, right? What's the new equilibrium? And let me point you out, point here first. Ito yung old equilibrium. IS curve will shift to the right. And in order to get the new equilibrium, E, since E is allowed to adjust, pwedeng umangat or tumaas ang E, right? And I think there's a picture here. Oh, boom. This is the picture, right? IS shifts to the right. E goes up to equilibrate IS and LM. And that means you have, at the end of the day, a stronger equilibrium exchange rate. Notice that Y is unchanged. Kasi again, Y is determined by M over P tsaka R star. Any questions so far? Thumbs up lang kung wala. Kung okay na kayo. And I'm also going to ask you guys to work through the other examples in the book. But basically, it's just, again, shifting IS to the right or to the left and understanding what shifts IS to the right or left, and then the shifts in LM, right or left, right? And in particular, let me point out the pictures. This is for monetary policy. An increase in M will shift LM to the right. Okay. So I guess I'll pause here to ask first, why is it that an increase in M will shift the LM curve to the right? So let's go to the LM example here. Okay. So nasaan ang M? Nasa LM siya, for sure. But according to this equation here, ano yung aakyat? Yung left-hand side or yung right-hand side? Okay. The left-hand side. Okay. And the left-hand side is, ano yung interpretation ng left-hand side? We call that the money supply, real money balances supply, right? And because there has to be equilibrium in the demand for liquidity market, pag tumaas ang supply, dapat tataas rin ang demand, right? And the only way demand can rise here is not R anymore kasi R star is fixed. Ano na lang only way for demand for money to go up? It's an increase in Y, right? So that's exactly it. So ganun lang siya kasimple. And that's why in the picture, Y has to rise because if money supply goes up, Y has to go up. to equilibrate the demand and supply for real money balances. Okay. And that's the floating exchange rate case. E will adjust um, to equilibrate IS and LM. Okay. And pansinin nyo, E will also change here. Y rises and E will go down. Right? So sa money market, sa goods market naman, Y will rise because you have a depreciation of the exchange rate. Okay. Accompanied by an increase in Y due to the fact that there has to be an increase in the demand for cash or demand for liquidity, I should say. Okay. Fixed exchange rate naman. And I think the fixed rate is a much more interesting situation. And it allows us to really understand what's happening with exchange rates, right? So in fixed exchange rate, guys, there is an official and a market rate. And the idea here is the government wants to make the market rate equal to the official rate. Okay, so iisa lang siya, right? But if there are differences between the official and the market rate, then there will be a transaction based on the fact na iba ang official rate and market rate. Okay. So we assume that there are big buyers and sellers can access both markets, the official and the quote unquote free market or the market rate. So in practice, guys, the E official or the exchange rate official can be greater or less than the E market. Okay. Now, note that E is again foreign over domestic, the usual, right? Now, let's use some easy numbers. Let's use E official is 2 and E market is 1. Okay. And meron lang tayong foreign currency and meron tayong domestic currency. Okay? Now, which of the two exchange rates, C official and C market, which is the stronger domestic currency? So let me pause here. Very important that everyone understands the interpretation. Saan mas malakas ang domestic currency? Sa e-official 2 or sa e-market 1? So I'm gonna pause here first, waiting for a response, either a mic or sa chat. Your choice. Should I repeat the question? Saan mas malakas? E-official or e-market? Mas malakas ang domestic currency. Okay. May sa official daw, because 2 is bigger than 1, right? And remember, the higher the number is, the stronger the domestic currency is. And just to make sure everyone understands, stronger here means the ability to buy the foreign currency. In particular, CE official can buy twice as much foreign currency as the market level, market rate. Okay? So good. So, given the fact na iba ang mga presyuhan dyan, guys, as long as you can buy and sell in either market, then you can for sure make money. Okay, using what's called arbitrage. So this is in fact what traders do all the time, right? Not just in goods, but in these assets called exchange rates also, currencies. Now, how can you make money? So buy where you can get a lot and sell where you can also get a lot. Okay? Ganun lang naman siya kasimple, right? You buy where you can get a lot. So, given si official, ano ang gusto mong bilhin using the official rate? Foreign or domestic currency? That's my question. Using the official rate na 2, would you rather buy domestic or would you rather buy foreign currency? Okay, may sagot sa chat. Let's wait. Foreign, sabi ni James at saka ni Rafael, correct. You buy foreign because if you sell domestic, you get 2 foreign. But pag ginamit mo yung official, if you buy domestic, Ano ba? If you buy foreign, you give up one, then you get two. So that's more than 1:1, right? So that's where you want to buy because that's where you get more than in the market. Because if you use the e-market, you sell one domestic currency, you only get one foreign. Okay. So that's where you can get a lot. So a lot of foreign currency. So in official, you'll want to buy foreign currency because you can get more foreign currency per domestic currency. Okay. In the meantime, in the market, in the so-called free market, you can sell the foreign currency and get more domestic. Right? Because dito, if you sell the foreign currency, you get only one half of domestic currency. But if you sell here, right, you get 1:1. Okay. So let's do an example transaction. Okay. So in official, you sell 1 peso. And what will that get you? Gets you what? X dollars USD. May chat 2, right? 2 USD. Correct? Meantime, using the 2 US dollars, what happens next? You sell where? In the market, the free market. And if you sell the US dollars in the market, what will you get? Kasi 1:1 siya, you get 2 pesos. Right? So what's your profit? It's 100% profit because you double your money basically, right? From 1 peso, you now have 2 pesos. Does this make sense? So even very, very small differences in the exchange rate can lead to more profit, except this is kasi it's super extreme, right? Literally in official, it's twice as strong as the other one. Therefore, you will double your money if you do it. This is also not the only unique transaction. You can also imagine other kinds of transactions, right? So in particular, you can start in the free market, and then if you have foreign currency, you can get domestic, right? Pwede mong baliktarin siya. So I will pause here to ask if there are any questions about, arbitrage and how you make money if there are two different rates. Okay, so this is pretty crucial. Okay, so make sure you understand this and you can construct transactions, right? To take advantage of changes in the exchange rate. Next. Now, LM needs to change to keep E constant kung fixed yung exchange rate. Just from a perspective of the drawing, right? Or the model, right? So look at this. Ano ba to? Look at this picture here, right? Now, mayroong fixed exchange rate, right, guys? So therefore, the LM has to shift around, right? To keep E constant. Okay? You have to maintain LM to keep E constant. But take note that based on the transactions that we've been talking about, the LM curve will automatically or naturally shift in the right direction to keep the equilibrium exchange rate constant as long as the bank or the central bank is willing to buy and sell at the official rate. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Okay. Okay, so recall that LM shifts to the right, higher M, LM shifts to the left, lower M. For the fixed exchange rates, it's automatic. Okay. Why? Because the LM shifts to the right if E official is less than E market. Okay. LM shifts to the right. Sorry, to the left pala. LM shifts to the left if E official is less than E market. In this case, arbitrageurs are buying more foreign currency from the BSP selling or giving up domestic currency. So, paano natin nakita yon? Nandito siya, right? Right. In particular, remember, e-official is, oops, sorry, dapat greater. E-official is greater than e-market. So, babagayan natin tong example natin. E-official is greater than e-market. Okay. Arbitrageurs are buying foreign currency from the BSP. So, official, you buy foreign currency per domestic currency, right? So, if you buy more foreign currency per domestic currency, that means you're giving up domestic currency. So it reduces the domestic currency in circulation, which is by definition the M, yung money supply. Okay? So it lowers M automatically because arbitrageurs or traders are selling or giving up domestic currency to get foreign currency. Right? So bumababa ang M and the LM curve shifts down. Okay? And the opposite is if E-official is less than E-market. Okay? All right. So this E-official is greater than E-market. That is exactly what our toy example here is. And that's also what this picture is. Let's go to fixed exchange rate, small open economy. Ano yung itsura niya? It's this. Literally panel B. Okay? So ano mapapansin niyo sa panel B? Ano yung initial equilibrium niya is ito. Under the initial equilibrium, what is the stronger rate? The official fixed rate or the market exchange rate? Here in panel B. I'll wait for the answer. Sa chat, yung official rate. So the official rate is here. The market is here, which is exactly the case that we are talking about here. The official rate is 2, and here the market rate is 1. So you can imagine this is 2 and then this is 1. So yung mangyayari dito is in the official fixed exchange rate market, people would like to get foreign currency and will give up their domestic currency, which will automatically, and here's the key part, automatic siya. The BSP doesn't actually have to do anything other than be willing to buy domestic currency and sell foreign currency at this higher exchange rate. Okay? Boom, boom, boom. LM curve now will shift to the left automatically. And then kabaliktaran naman dito, guys, if in the opposite case, the equilibrium or market exchange rate is higher than the official or fixed exchange rate here. And then what will happen is that now people want domestic currency from the official rate, from the BSP. And therefore, they will now sell foreign currency to get more domestic currency. And then the LM curve will shift to the right. Okay, so this is an automatic process. Okay, depending on the relative value of E-official to E-market. So notice that the LM curve will shift automatically to keep E constant. Okay, thus we lose independent monetary policy. If we change M or R, in this case, we cannot, right? Because R equals R star. For Y stabilization, it should automatically adjust in the opposite direction, right? Because you want to keep E constant. Because as long as the BSP is willing and able to buy and sell foreign currency at the rate that it wants, which is the official fixed rate, then it will the M will automatically change to shift LM to the correct position. Okay. But for fiscal policy or anything else that changes IS, it will magnify the effects on Y. Okay, so that's super important. And let me look at this one here. Boom. This is a fiscal expansion under fixed exchange rates. So you should imagine IS and LM1. This is the original equilibrium. Okay. Ano yung unang nangyari under fiscal expansion? IS curve will shift to the right. Correct? here. And normally, if the exchange rate is flexible or free to adjust, what will happen to the exchange rate? Let me pause here to ask, to make sure everyone knows. If the exchange rate is flexible, what would happen to the exchange rate in this case? If the IS curve shifts to the right. Recall, we already talked about this in the flexible exchange rate. E has to go up in the flexible rate. So dito siya pupunta. But that is unacceptable to the bank, right? Because you want a fixed exchange rate, right? Okay. So if this is the fixed exchange rate, either M has to go up by monetary policy, or there's a natural or automatic way that LM will rise, correct? Because of the processes that we talked about earlier. Either way, if the BSP wants to continue to buy and sell at this price, LM curve will have to shift to the right until the equilibrium E goes back down to the fixed level. Right? So there are two ways to do it. LM curve can shift to the right directly by an increase in money supply because alam ni government or ni BSP that they have to do it. Okay. Or what's also as likely or possibly to help it things go along, traders will start to sell their foreign currency to get domestic currency, increasing the money supply also. Okay. And notice that it will change Y. Okay. And this is one of the things that will change Y, right? Because LM, again, in the Mundel Flemming model, requires LM to change if Y will change, right? In particular, for Y to go up, the LM curve has to shift to the right, or money supply, domestic money supply has to increase. If Y goes down, then it must also be that domestic money supply has to go down. So in a sense, this is a much simpler idea, much simpler model, right? So you can think about this in terms of, just looking at the picture, what does it take to keep this blue vertical bar to hold true to this vertical bar, right? To keep this as the constraint. If you're starting from here, the only way to move to this black dot once the IS curve shifts to the right is for the LM curve to shift to the right also. But from an economics perspective, yung key takeaways dito, guys, is that the monetary policy itself is now subservient to keeping E at the fixed value, right? So the LM curve will shift to the right here as automatically or via active monetary policy to keep E equal to E bar or whatever the fixed rate is. This is also, you can see it here in this picture. Okay, so what is this picture? A monetary expansion under fixed exchange rates. Correct? So under a fixed exchange rate, your E is this one. And if your money expanded from here to here, what will happen normally if you allow the exchange rate to adjust? If you move from this L bar, LM star to this dashed red line, what would normally happen? E equilibrium, E would be lower because the intersection point is down here, right? But then the bank would realize that to maintain the fixed exchange rate, the money supply and LM curve must return to their original positions. Again, either through the automatic process that we talked about earlier, or from the fact that the monetary authority will contract money supply based on the fact that they have to hit the old fixed exchange rate. Okay. A final note, a country with a fixed exchange rate can, however, conduct a type of monetary policy, a different type of monetary policy. It can decide to change the level at which the exchange rate is fixed. Now, when you lower it, it's called a devaluation. So the fixed exchange rate, you can lower it. You can say it's now lower. It's called a devaluation. And if you increase it, it's called a revaluation. Okay. In the Mundel Flemming model, devaluation shifts the LM curve to the right. It acts like an increase in the money supply under a floating exchange rate. Devaluation thus expands net exports and raises aggregate income, right? So you can imagine doing that here. If the fixed exchange rate goes down, then it must be the case that the LM curve has to shift to the right? To again equilibrate the IS and the LM curve under a lower fixed exchange rate value. Okay. So those are the important concepts for the first half. Oh, again, I invite you, there's other things that the book discusses. I invite you to look at those and make sure you are able to follow, right? And then here is an interesting table, which is table 12-1. This summarizes every experiment that's done in the book: fiscal expansion, monetary expansion, and then import restriction, whether it's a floating exchange rate regime or a fixed exchange rate regime. Okay. On Thursday, we'll continue. These are slightly more complicated versions. These ones will complicate naman the ISLM Mundel Flemming model. So now you can have interest rate differentials and country risks. And then we'll also talk about something called should it be fixed? Should it be not fixed? And finally, the impossible trinity as a concept. And then we'll probably be doing some work, some end of chapter exercises on Thursday. Since most likely my pasok, since the weather is actually quite nice right now. Having said that, any questions? I will upload once the video here is finished. I will upload this video and possibly probably these slides as well. Mukhang useful naman tong slides na to. Okay. Any questions so far? So yeah, we'll be done by chapter 11, chapter 12. This is chapter 12. We'll be done by chapter 12 on Thursday, and then that's the end of the topics for the second long test. So the second long test is basically a little stabilization policy, so chapter 9, I think, and then 10, 11, 12, which is ISLM. Any further questions? Let me now stop the share. Okay, great. If there are no further questions, I'll see you on Thursday. Bye. Ingat.